are listening to Digital Denizens.
Oh, jeez. Oh, come on. Oh. Wrong one.
You are listening to Digital Denizens.
All right. What's up, everybody? Oh, man, I got I got the labels mixed up on the bottom.
No.
Because mine was on the other side before. We'll just change that real quick. Oh, man. Technical difficulties never cease to amaze me.
That's right.
All right. There we go. That looks better.
Brilliance of live broadcasting.
Right, seriously. And I just got like a streaming deck and everything for my computer. And of course I'm still like trying to work out all the kinks between like profile changes and all that stuff. So it's just yeah, it's fun. Anyway, what's up everybody, and welcome to the Digital Denizens and the Content Creation Corner. This is our newer series. Just want to let you guys know this is where we live to discuss and interrogate all things with people in the ever-expansive gaming realm. Today is April 23rd, episode 5. I am your host, Keith Whalen, aka The Gamer Stash. And of course, I am joined alongside me by Brent Insko from OpenXR. How the hell are you, man?
Hey, man, thanks. Thanks for having me on. Great to be here. Looking forward to talking OpenXR and AR and VR in general with you.
Yes, dude, this is so exciting for me. I've been looking forward to this for weeks now. You know, it's just exciting to talk about what you guys are doing within OpenXR. And you know, I don't know that a lot of people know about OpenXR. You know, I mean, I've been into VR for a long time, and I sort of like heard about you guys within the last couple of years. But I think, you know, VR is still kind of like a niche sort of market that people outside who don't know about VR in general are still like learning about all this kind of stuff. And I think it's very important for people to know what you guys do and bring to the table and are able to make the VR gaming possible.
Sure. Yeah. No. Happy to talk about. A lot of people don't want to know how the sausage is made. We can talk about how we do what we do. Try to make the VR and AR markets expand even faster by some of the things we're providing to the ecosystem.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's very important. So we've got an exciting episode ahead of us, but before we get into the nitty gritty, this series is basically so we can reach out to anybody within the gaming industry, whether we're talking about streamers, podcasters, YouTubers, artists and things like that, developers, you name it. And we're basically trying to connect them with others and help if you guys are looking to get started with like your own channel, or if you're looking for advice on starting a channel or getting into the games industry. And this is really cool having Brent here because, I mean, he's one of the professionals. He's been doing this for a long time. And I think it's really cool to see what happens kind of behind the curtain, so to speak. So we know how difficult it is kind of starting your own channel and getting things off the ground. With New Game Plus Network, which is the company that I'm sort of working with, we're creating a community, a resource community to bring people together if you want to collaborate with one another, or just chat and get advice on getting started with a channel. But we also are we're going to start implementing something as well with like mental well-being and things like that, because I think that's a big thing within life in general. And sometimes you need to turn to people to ask advice or just somebody to help boost your morale a little bit. I think that's really important. So if you guys want to hit us up, you can message me on Instagram, digital_denizens. You can also find us on Instagram at New Game Plus Network. And we also got the email, which is newgameplusnetwork@gmail.com. So please hit us up. Find us on Discord. We will get you in to the community, become part of the family. So let's see. Now, without further ado, let's get into the nitty gritty with Brent Insko here. So, for some of us out there who don't know, OpenXR is it's still part of the Kronos group, correct?
Correct.
Okay, cool. And so do you want to kind of explain a little bit about what you guys do there?
Sure. So to kind of start from a higher level, so the Kronos Group is a consortium of about 150 companies, and they're really focused on how you build standards for interacting between software and hardware. And so they have standards around 3D graphics, they have standards around AR and VR,
Mm-hmm.
parallel programming, and machine learning. And so, people may be familiar with things like OpenGL, OpenGLES, and Vulkan. Those are the graphics ones. They're
Yeah.
graphics-focused APIs. Obviously, we'll talk about OpenXR. You have OpenCL for parallel programming, etc. And so these companies are really trying to make it easier for application developers to develop on a variety of different platforms. They're also wanting to help the hardware guys
Mm-hmm.
build conformant hardware so they can get more applications on their brand new platform that hasn't existed before.
So
And
basic.
so,
So I don't mean to cut you off. So I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
So basically, you mean like if you wanted to make a VR or AR game, you would make it so it's easier to develop on multiple platforms like Steam or Oculus or Vive, and you mean also hardware, meaning like multiple headsets, like whether you're using Index or anything like that. So they have to do probably minimal work to get them retrofitted for each of them.
Yeah, exactly. So if from the application perspective, yes, that's the goal for OpenXR, which we
Yeah.
can talk about now or later. But yeah, it's really meant to provide a single API for AR and VR
Mm-hmm.
interactions between the software and the underlying platform, so that as a application developer, a game developer builds, they're building a single code path. So they're only coding once, they're only testing once,
Yeah.
and then it's going to work. If we do our jobs right, we'll work across a variety of platforms. As you said, from Steam VR to Oculus to Vive to Microsoft Windows Mixed Reality, etc. And so it really decreases the burden on the game developers because they have this single path they can code to and hopefully test to. They can concentrate on building better content rather than testing to make sure it works across every platform that's out there.
Yeah, dude. Oh, that's awesome. So, if you guys, I wanted to also mention too, if you guys have any questions, you guys can save them for the chat, till we're towards the end of the interview. And I can kind of give you guys a heads up when you can put your questions in the chat if you guys have any, for Brent or myself or whatever. And that way we can, if you guys want to have him answer any of those questions for you, I think that'd be really cool. So, so now that we know who Brent is and what he does, let's see. Would you care to tell us? Oh wait, hold on a second. Would you care to tell us a little bit about how OpenXR kind of came to be a little bit?
Sure. So in the early days, you had Valve and Oculus with kind of the first commercially viable headsets out there, and you had applications being developed. But both platforms had their own APIs to access the information of the underlying hardware for the games to get access to. Like the controllers, the tracking, the button presses, etc. But most of that is very common, right? You need to know where the head is, where the hands are, what buttons being pressed, how hard, how long, etc. So, in late 2016, Valve approached Kronos about saying, "Hey, this doesn't make a lot of sense. Why do we have our own, ways of doing things? Let's get everybody together and develop one standard way of getting access to the tracking information, one set of ways to getting the inputs, etc." And so basically this working group got formed within Kronos because a lot of the companies interested were already members of Kronos. And so it made it very easy to get this up and running.
To get everybody collaborated with each other.
Exactly. So
nice.
The next few months, early 2017, we formed a working group, said, hey, this is what we're going to focus on. And then basically companies came together and put out like kind of early drafts of like, where should we start, right? What are we going to start with? And you can really think of OpenXR as having is like the generation 2 API for VR, because Valve had some experience with Open VR, and Oculus had experience with OVR, and they knew the pain points, they knew the problems they had developers had early on. They're like, okay, if we could like wipe the board clean and start over, what would we do differently? And that's really where OpenXR came. And Oculus actually developed and submitted kind of like the bare bones, first draft of what they thought OpenXR should look like, and kind of took it and ran from there, trying to make sure that we were covering all the platforms of the interested parties. And then over the next couple of years, it always takes longer to develop standards than you expect it to. So it took some time making sure we're going to get support across all the different companies. And then in July of 2019, we launched the 1.0 specification for OpenXR.
That's
amazing.
Talk
a little bit about the as I said, the sausage being made. We talk a little bit about the difficulties and challenges to get there. But we got that out in 2019, and it took some time for us. Once you get a specification, you need the tests developed as well to make sure that you can test the platforms to make sure they're actually doing what they say they're going to do, so that if an application does get developed on OpenXR, you can expect it to run across all these different platforms. So that took some extra time. And then last year, we really started seeing, support on all the different platforms become available, and start seeing, applications use it as well. So
that's really quite a journey. Yeah, no, that is an awesome story, and I bet a long journey, but you guys have come so far from the beginning. I mean, just seeing how well some of these games work across different hardware and platforms and stuff. Because before, I started off when I got into VR. I started off with the PlayStation VR, which is it's very, I mean, it was good at the time, but it's still it's got its own issues with tracking and all that kind of stuff, and ended up upgrading to the Oculus Rift S, which was a really good, capable headset. I did really like that. And so I still own a lot of Oculus games from when I had that headset, but now I ended up upgrading to the Index, and I used some kind of middleware software like Revive and stuff like that to still be able to access my old library. And just seeing the way that some of that stuff works in tandem from Oculus over to Steam works really well, even though you're using totally different controllers and stuff like that. It's able to recognize that you don't have finger tracking built into this game for this specific the Index controllers and things like that. So it's really exciting to see where you guys have come with all of that.
Well, and the goal is to move Revive, which translates the OVR commands and the OpenVR commands, right? So it would be to the point where the original developer of the application, it would just work across those platforms. And then the other great thing we're trying to do is with OpenXR is making sure that we focused a lot on how input devices would work and how you would expand them. So applications developed today, the goal would be with OpenXR, weird controllers you can't even imagine today get developed. You'll be able to map your controls from your old, from Half-Life Alyx or something today to some controller that doesn't even exist yet, right? So making
really
sure
cool.
that you give life to the applications going, onto future platforms.
So you're always thinking 10 steps ahead of what you guys are currently working on or doing.
That's generous, but we're trying to step maybe 1 or 2 steps.
No, that makes sense though. I think that is definitely important to see. You guys can obviously probably see a little bit further ahead of what the consumer can see, and see, or at least where you guys want things to go, and then kind of testing and kind of working these things out as you go along. Sure. I think that's really cool. I was thinking of something and then I totally lost it. It'll probably come back to me.
Oh yeah, no worries.
Let's see. What kind of vendors and developers do you guys usually participate with the Kronos Group and OpenXR?
Sure. We have probably around 40 or more companies involved, so I'm not going to be able to name them all, but
Yeah.
they can obviously check out the Kronos and OpenXR websites if they want to see. But you
Mhm.
have all the major AR and VR vendors: Oculus, Valve, HTC, Microsoft,
Mhm.
Samsung, Vario, Magic Leap, and HP. You have the hardware graphics vendors. You have Intel, AMD, NVIDIA, ARM, and Qualcomm. And then you have the rendering software and game engine guys. You have Epic, Unity, and Blender. And you also have some participation by peripheral VR peripheral developers like Tobii with their eye tracking and Ultraleap with
Oh,
their hand
wow.
tracking. So you really have companies representing various different aspects of the AR and VR market participating
Yeah.
to make sure we're pushing the API in the right direction.
Yeah, and I have checked out some of the stuff like on your guys' Twitter page talking about like the Vario, and that is like a really interesting headset in itself.
Right.
Having like I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it has eye tracking and stuff like that, better resolution than even like the Index and quite a few other.
Yeah,
um,
it's a super high resolution central area, and then peripheral like regular resolution. So yeah, you can get better. Just a totally different type of headset from what the
yeah,
others are. So
yeah, and I mean currently it's aimed more towards like commercial more than consumer, right?
I think so,
Yeah.
but check with Vario on that.
Yeah.
They'd be willing to sell it to consumers, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's just it is interesting seeing like all those newer headsets and things. Oh, the one thing I was gonna say was you mentioned like Valve and like all these companies came and kind of came together to create OpenXR and all that kind of stuff, working together. I think that's really interesting because I don't know that you really see that as much coming from like console gaming and things like that versus like
Hmm.
VR. VR is like a totally different breed in itself where you see everybody like collaborating because they sort of want kind of the same, like you said, the same standards and things so that way everything works across the board. Whereas like with consoles, you have PlayStation or Sony with PlayStation doing their own thing. You have Microsoft over here doing their own thing, and then Nintendo doing their own thing as well. So it's interesting to see that even though you guys are on all these different platforms, you guys are like, no, we need to come together and make sure that everything works properly. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
I think with the VR and AR market so niche still, right? You
mhm.
really want to reduce the friction to people getting access to this, and so anything you can do to try to help make sure that um, whatever platform somebody ends up buying, they get access to the most content, so that they don't end up getting burned, and you only get 5 titles because nobody ever develops for your platform, right? And so
Yeah,
as long as we start making consumers more comfortable with, hey, whatever, as long as I buy something that's compatible with OpenXR, I know I'm going to get this library of hundreds of, or eventually thousands of titles that will
yeah,
work on my platform. So
yeah. That's impressive. That's awesome.
hopefully we get to thousands. That's what would be great.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, as I was saying before we kind of started the interview, I mean, VR is just like within the last year or two, it's been exploding.
Hmm.
I have people, I mention VR to people and they're like, "Oh man, it's." I mean, I think one of the main things I get is like the barrier to entry.
Yeah,
Obviously, like
of
not a lot
course.
of people have the money to do that, but the other thing is like, oh, is there even any games out there? Like when I got into VR, even like 2 years ago, when I had actually finally got my own headset, um, I was like blown away by the amount of like games and things that were out there on the market that
Hmm.
I were just like hidden gems, and I was just like, oh my god, these are amazing. How did I not know about this? And I just kept
Yeah.
finding things and finding things. And so like I try to preach to people like it is pretty excellent. I had my brother come over before the pandemic and all that stuff, and he had used my Index and my Oculus when I had it. And he was just like, this is phenomenal. Like I don't. The immersiveness is just like it's breathtaking. Like the first time you ever put one of these headsets on and experience like a true game or something like that, it's wild. It's unlike
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah, no, that's one of the challenges is like it is a completely compelling experience, but you do have to put the headset. right? It's not one of those
Yeah.
you can mass broadcast to people. They actually have to put a
Right.
physical device on their head to understand like the power
Exactly.
that VR provides. So
Yeah, because my brother was watching, I think, one of the videos of I can't remember what game it was. He was like, I don't know, the graphics don't look that great, but then he actually played it on the headset and he was like, okay, now I see what you're talking about. Like, yeah, it's totally, it's apples to oranges when you're trying to compare that kind of stuff, and then you put it on and it's a totally different experience than you're used to. Um, so, are there any upcoming projects that you could talk about currently that you guys are working on?
um, um, some of the things that we're working on right now are as you can imagine, fixes for 1.0, things that either
Mm,
didn't get in or things that we were like, oh wow, we really wish we'd done this differently, which you would always expect with the 1.0. And then
right.
we generally don't talk a lot about what we're thinking about the future, but kind of like general areas. We're trying to hold the core API pretty stable right now because we do want adoption by games, so we don't want to be changing a lot of things under the covers for them. So we want to
Yeah.
see more and more games and applications use it. But we are looking forward, to the future. We have released extensions around eye tracking and hand tracking. So if there are platforms that have those capabilities, you can get access to them through OpenXR. And
Hmm.
it's really kind of the philosophy of a lot of the Chronos APIs is you have like a core API and then you can extend it, um, through some standard mechanisms. It allows platforms to advertise, new and interesting capabilities. It
Yeah.
also lets us figure out, is this the right way to access these new features
Hmm.
and play around with it. So like I said, eye tracking, hand tracking, and they're really looking at how do we improve the augmented reality and mixed reality usages, like what additional information can applications get from the underlying platforms that would make
Right.
those experiences more compelling. So there's a lot of work going on in trying to understand uh, what information do we need to pass from the real world
Yeah.
environment in through the platform to the application to make really compelling experience.
So how does that work? Does like the developer send you like pieces of the game to work it in, or do you guys create the eye tracking and hand tracking sort of API and then they're able to access it from OpenXR?
So a lot of times it can be a partnership, right? The
Okay.
vendors can work with application guys and say,
Hmm.
hey, if we had access to these pieces from your platform, it'd be really helpful. We could expose it this way. We could do new and interesting usages that haven't been done before. And so a lot of times the individual platform vendors will work with a partner and then they'll bring it to Chronos and say, hey, we think we have something here.
Yeah.
This is the way we think it would work. And then, almost inevitably other vendors will be working on similar things and we'll start collaborating and go, well, your platform has these capabilities. This platform has these
And then you
capabilities.
can kind of combine them
What's the
efforts a
Venn
little bit.
diagram of merged things that we can
Yeah.
standardize on and make sense? And people have experience like, oh, we tripped over this. We shouldn't do it that way. Let's do it this way. So that's standardization is almost not necessarily the last step, but it's a there's been a lot of research up to that point, and then it's really about, okay, now how do we actual the mass application
Right.
development and game developers, right?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, that's just so cool. I mean, seeing that you guys are again, it just blows my mind to see that you guys are all collaborating and sort of creating this community to share information because yeah, I mean, VR is a very complicated thing, and all of the different like inner workings of it um can be very difficult, and if you don't get it right, it can totally ruin the experience for the player or the consumer or whatever. So I totally see like why you guys do that. You guys are trying to make sure that you can get to that point of standardization, but through testing and testing and testing. You
Yeah.
know, that's really cool. Um, does OpenXR have anything to do with how crossplay works between headsets and platforms? Like, um, I guess in any way like multiplayer sort of crossplay.
Sure. So I would say not directly. I would say,
Mm,
in particular, like, OpenXR doesn't influence like a particular platform's decision to make a title exclusive or not.
right.
You would, the way I would say that we are, or can help that is that we actually make it possible for these games to be on different headsets.
Mm,
To enable them to be on the Vive at the same time as the Rift, and not
yeah.
have a huge burden on the developers. But in terms of multiplay, we've OpenXR is mostly focused on just the AR aspects and not like what happens under the cover, and like how
Okay, so
certain
not as much
manage.
as like not as deep into the game as like say somebody's playing the same game on Oculus and then their friend is playing on Steam and then they want to play together. You guys don't have any sort of anything to do with like the integration of how those play together.
Not that I know of. No.
Okay. I was just curious. No, because that was just something I wondered. I was like, I wonder if they have something to do with that. That's interesting. Well, that's good to know.
You can see, I would say, going back to future plans, you can think about in like mixed reality situations where maybe you're going to share environment information between
Mhm.
multiple players. We are looking at, how do you, like I was talking about, how do you get information about the real world environment you're in, potentially encode it and provide it to the applications that could also be provided to another user somewhere, so you could share the same
Yeah.
some information about the real world from one person to the other. So there might be future things where that comes into play, but
Yeah.
that's not quite, we're not quite there yet.
Yeah. Baby steps.
Yep.
Let's see. Do you foresee OpenXR improving? Oh, wait, hold on a second. I think that was sort of the same question. Um, let's see. Improving crossplay between different HMDs or on different platforms. Yeah, that was basically the same thing.
Mhm.
Have you been with OpenXR since the beginning? And what would you say that's like the journey from the beginning up until now?
Sure. Yes, I was. I've been part of it since the inception, 2016, 2017.
Mm-hmm.
I was just a member, and then the original chair was Nick Whiting from Epic,
Okay.
and then he stepped down to take on some more responsibilities at Epic. So I was elected in late 2018, and then re-elected last year. Chair served for 2 years in Kronos. So yeah, it's been an exciting journey. It's always interesting to see how you get to an API, the 1.0 API. It's always a struggle to get there.
Yeah.
You always think, oh, there are more things that we should put in. What gets left out, and sometimes you just have to. It's like it's never going to be perfect. You just have to draw a line and say, this is what we're going to put out there,
Right.
and be happy with it. And now that we have a couple it out there being it being out there a couple of years,
Mm.
we're actually pretty happy with it. There aren't as horrible the changes as you would expect from 1.0. And I think just seeing it now being deployed on all the major platforms, from Windows to all the Oculus headsets to Valve and HTC, etc., Vario, and even an open source implementation from Collabora called Monado.
Yeah.
I think the future is bright for OpenXR, and I think it's still exciting times
Yeah.
from the beginning, and looking forward to the future.
That's awesome. What's the most exciting thing about 1.0, would you say?
We spend a lot of time on the system, which isn't going to sound very exciting, but we really wanted to make sure that we allowed the maximum amount of flexibility
Mm-hmm.
possible, because the input devices. I mean, just look at the Valve Index controllers compared to touch controllers, right?
Yeah.
And the wand controllers. They're vastly different. They're vastly different capabilities. How do you enable a game to take advantage of those things and build one application that, and then also we wanted to do things that Valve had introduced in terms of being able to remap controllers, right? Oh, I don't like this button for jump. Let's map it to something else, or
Yeah.
which really allows for accessibility improvements by being able to change the controllers based on what you're capable of doing, and also
Mm.
just user improvements. We spent a lot of time on that, to the point to where there are other parts of Kronos thinking maybe we should spin that off into a separate input API, because it's that flexible.
Yeah.
Because as we had talked about earlier, you want to think about what possible input controllers could come in the future. you're doing real world articulated hands as input as well, right? What does that look like? And I think that's the most that was the most challenging part of the API, and something I think is the most rewarding. I think is the most flexible, which is it's really good.
Yeah. So did you guys have something to do with like with Steam on how they, because I know Steam VR has a lot of input changes that you can make within the controllers and setting your own bindings and all that stuff to the controllers. Did you guys have a little bit to do with that?
I would say they influenced us probably,
Oh, okay.
right? I mean, that was one of the things, one of the goals anyway, because we knew how flexible we were going to have to be anyway, and it's like
Yeah.
adding the ability to the user changing the bindings was a minimal addition on top of everything else we were trying to do. So
Yeah, no, I think that's really cool. I don't have a lot of experience using like Vive and stuff like that, but um like with the index and all that stuff, and I love that you can change your bindings like to whatever you're comfortable with as the player. Versus I know like Oculus doesn't, not I don't think Oculus has like a ton of like changeability and customizing with your bindings as much as like Steam does there. Um yeah, that's really interesting. Um let's see. What would you say are some of the future goals of OpenXR as of 2021?
um, I would say, basically become the API that everybody is going forward.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you look at, Valve put out on their blog saying, "Hey, the future is OpenXR. This is where we're going to do future
Mm-hmm.
changes and future improvements and future additions." Oculus has it on their platforms. Microsoft has it both on their Windows Mixed Reality and their HoloLens 2 platform. So it's really about getting more and more adoption of OpenXR.
Yeah.
And then I think it's also, one of the focuses I mentioned before was, it had originally been focused on virtual reality, but as we got more members and as augmented reality became more of a thing and mixed reality looking forward, we really started thinking about those capabilities well. But there's much more we can do in that space, and that's
Yeah.
the thing that we're looking at adding as we speak. We're looking at those features. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean it's as I said, like VR is just like it's getting better and better, and it's so cool to see um how much better it's getting so fast. Within like the last 2 years, it's getting better, and seeing new features and new like sort of immersion building things that are in some of these newer games coming out. It's always something that it surprises me every time I play a new VR game. I'm like, oh wow, that's a really interesting touch, or just
mhm.
attention to detail sort of things. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there's and then you look at the titles coming out this year and
Hmm.
forward. Yeah, we get more and more quality content, and I think you're going to see more and more adoption by users, which you really have to get to a certain point before it becomes really economically feasible for
Hmm.
game developers to target VR.
Yeah.
And hopefully in the next few years we'll kind of cross that threshold to where the big players and the big titles can start coming to VR as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that, because I know like it was last year, kind of before the pandemic hit and everything, we had news coming from like Ubisoft and some other companies like that. They were like, "Oh, we want to do an Assassin's Creed sort of VR experience. We want to do possibly like a Splinter Cell VR experience." You see a lot of developers kind of putting their hand in the pot and
Mhm.
being like, "Yeah, we want a piece of that too. Like we would like to do it." And um some of them I think that have come out, you see like kind of nail it right on the head, right where they wanted it to be initially from their vision, and then some others that kind of don't, they kind of fall a little flat, like they were way too ambitious, I think, with it, and or didn't have possibly the experience, working on that sort of game, because it's not the same as working on a typical console game. As we've been talking, there's a lot more that goes into behind the scenes of, excuse me, crafting all of this stuff for it to work properly, and for the consumer to have the best possible experience when they're playing it. Otherwise, it's like if it's janky and it's just not, like all the mechanics and button presses and all that kind of stuff aren't working the way that you expect it. Like, you know, somebody's gonna be upset.
Yeah. Well, and you also, if you're talking about really high quality the index and stuff, you still need a fairly decent PC rig
Yeah.
to drive it. And if you look at kind of Steam hardware surveys of where the general system lands, we're not quite there yet, right, in terms of what the average user uses. And so
Yeah.
you could also imagine, as we go forward, just the power of the PC moves forward, and so the average PC will start to be able to play the really cool, really
Yeah.
exciting titles, and I think that'll help even more, drive adoption as well.
Yeah. That just made me think about have you guys I saw a little bit, I think, on your LinkedIn was talking about implementing possible like ray tracing and things like that, having a lot of the newer cards and stuff coming out. What's that like working with that, trying to implement that sort of thing within VR games?
So yeah, it's definitely a challenge. It's definitely trying to pack that much performance into the systems that
Hmm.
you're working on. We're always trying to push the boundaries of and make the graphics more and more real. So I think you'll start to see more and more of that. You're also seeing um, things around networked VR gaming where maybe you can uh, do things if you have high powered computers on the other side of the network. Can you drive the latency low enough with like 5G or really fast networking to where
Oh wow.
maybe you could do some amount of the rendering in the cloud and pull it down even for VR, which is it's still pie in the sky, but
Oh yeah, for sure.
you could imagine if you do some level of predicting, like they do today, where they do time warp and they do some prediction of where the head's going to be. Maybe you could do some of that and predict where the head might be a few milliseconds in the future and render it across a bunch of different farms and pull it down the
Yeah,
network. There's lots of different things you could potentially do there to maybe try to get
that's very
something like a
true.
fully ray traced frame down
Yeah.
and into the headset.
Well, and now you also have like things like DLSS, which kind of renders things way different than what we were used to. And it's only getting better as, games start to implement that as well. Which I think, if correct me if I'm wrong, I think with DLSS, I think it render it kind of over time instead of like pre-rendering it.
That's a good question. I'm not exactly sure.
Hmm.
I think it does do some machine learning to see how to do the super sampling. It might be over time. I'm just not fully versed on that
No,
yet.
no, no, you're fine. Like I've done a little bit of research on it, not a ton, just because I was like, how does this work? Because it is weird how it does make things a lot easier to work. So I wonder if that's like a possibility down the line, as you guys kind of play around with it more, for that to
Mhm.
work. But that's interesting. That'll be really cool to see ray tracing and stuff like that within a VR game, being able to see real time reflections and all that kind of stuff, and the lighting that comes along with that. That's really exciting.
Mhm.
um, let's see. What would you say it's like working with OpenXR?
The group or the API?
um, I guess both. We can do
Okay.
one or the other.
Okay. Sure. I would say, well, let's say, I think it can be a bit challenging to get used to it at first.
Hmm.
I would compare it. It's not quite the burden that like Vulkan is, if people are familiar with developing Vulkan as compared to something like OpenGL
Yeah.
from the very beginning. But I think it's a reasonable API. I think with the game engine guys that we have involved, like Epic and their Unreal Engine and the Unity engine, they have it integrated in the game engine. You can use it directly by clicking a few buttons and just use it. So it can be like from a developer almost seamless and
That's
under the
awesome.
covers. Or if you're developing your own engine or your own title and you want to integrate OpenXR, I think that is one of the things we're also looking at for this year and going forward is we do want to provide more sample code, more tutorials, how do you get started? How do you bootstrap? Be able to provide project files people can download and just start playing with it.
That's really cool.
So those sorts of things. But we do have, examples. Blender has it integrated. All the browsers based on Chrome have it integrated as well on the Chromium source code to drive WebXR. And Microsoft's Flight Simulator is using OpenXR as well. So you
awesome.
can use it. It's not that horrible, but I think there are we're always looking at are there things we can do to improve it from a developer experience. So I'd be happy to hear from those watching that or listening to the podcast now or later. Hey, we find this challenging or we don't understand how this works. It'd be great to have blog posts or tutorials. Or, hey, fix this the next revision, please. That sort of information is always great. And we have our most everything out on GitHub, so you can check out our the conformance tests are out there. So you find a problem on a platform, you can submit a test to us, and we can integrate it. All our GitHub, check it, comments, make fixes, and submit them to us, and we're more than happy to listen to developers and get their feedback.
Yeah, all the feedback definitely helps. I mean, it's only going to make it better and improve the experience for everybody. That's so cool. Is OpenXR free, like a free API for anybody? Like if they wanted to download, say, Unity or something like that and start like creating their own projects, they can go to GitHub and get OpenXR's API and start implementing it right away.
Oh yeah, no, totally. It's totally free to use in your applications or in game engines.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, there's the Monado has open source implementation if you want to use it from a platform perspective.
Wow.
The place where I would say we charge for it is from a VR platform perspective. If you want to say your platform supports OpenXR, we do have this conformance suite we want you to run and pay fees for, just so that we can mostly Kronos is nonprofit, right?
You guys got to make money to further improve it,
right? Yeah, we want to make improvements to the API, want to make improvements to the tests, and so the companies like Valve or HTC or Microsoft will submit their tests for their platforms and pay a fee on that end. But no, for application and game developers, totally free. Please use it. Everybody try to use it. More the better, more the merrier.
That's awesome. So is it basically work the same if you were to use OpenXR for regular video game developing as well as VR? How does that work?
So you could. That's interesting. Interesting question for the inputs. But really, we try to separate and focus really OpenXR. What are the things you need for application? And so the things like getting the tracking information about your head or hands or whatever number of trackers you're wearing. Input devices. Also some information about if you have haptic feedback in the controllers. And then leave like the game stuff, like the rendering, the that sort of thing to the 3D APIs like Vulkan, right? So really OpenXR works really well with like Vulkan because they're both targeting high performance, low latency applications. Vulkan was we always thought about it as like you're letting developers run around with scissors, right? It's like, okay, we'll let you go as fast as you possibly can. Just be careful because there's lots of potential pitfalls.
That's interesting.
But you do pair it with a graphics API. In fact, our graphics API interactions are completely separate. Those are all outside of the OpenXR API. So you actually, when you're setting it up, you query, hey, do you want to use it with Vulkan? Do you want to use it with DirectX? Do you want to use it with OpenGL ES or something, right? So we have some interaction with the graphics API, but we tried to separate that out from the pure like API, AR and VR information that we need.
So if you're not using it for VR, then you're essentially using it to help render.
Probably not going to use it. Yeah, if you're not using it for AR or VR, probably not going to use the API. So.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, interesting. What would you say? Has been your favorite? Oh wait, hold on. What's it like working at OpenXR? That was the other question. Sorry.
Oh, okay, yeah, the part from the API to the group,
Yeah.
it's really good. I mean, it's great. I've been part of Kronos for more years than I care to share. I was originally working with OpenGL, then
Mhm.
OpenGLES, Vulkan, and then I stepped away for a year and then got sucked back into doing OpenXR. But it's really great to see. I mean, you have like the really senior technical people from these companies coming together and
Mhm.
driving these standards because they're the ones that know like how it's supposed to work, what's going to work best on their platforms.
Yeah.
So it's really great. We have weekly teleconferences, so you have the senior guys who know what they're talking about, from 40 or 50 different companies, all chiming in, every week. You get to know people over time because it's generally, you're passionate about, you have the guys passionate and girls passionate about AR and VR calling in. And then we have face to faces. Well, when we could have face to
Yeah.
faces, and hopefully we
Right.
get back to that point,
Mhm.
and get to meet them, and it's just, it's just great to get and hear other people's perspectives and other companies' perspectives, and it's very apolitical because we all tend to be engineers, and so it's very like let's do what's right for developers and right for the platforms, and
Yeah.
that tends to work out pretty well.
Yeah, that is really cool. I think you get to, yeah, like you were saying, you get to meet a lot of really awesome people from all these different developers and things like that. And you're like, you guys worked on that or whatever, being a fan of VR games and all that kind of stuff. I think that is so cool. I can only imagine. One day.
Yeah.
I can dream. Um, what would you say is your favorite memory while working with your team?
I would say probably um, San Diego. It was at a face to face. This was early 2019. So
Mm-hmm.
this is a couple of years into development, and we were trying to put a stake in the sand and say, "Hey, we need to get this API." And there were lots of people like, "Oh, it's not ready yet. There's going to be corner cases we haven't." It's like, look, we just need to get it done. And so we were really crunching. In fact, the week of that face to face, we ended up writing like a quarter of the specification. If you look at the change list, you can see like 25% of the specification was written during that week.
Oh wow. Just
So
crunch.
we were like, everybody was working like heads down, writing parts of it. We were printing it out, and like
Mm-hmm.
people reviewing, off in the corner and stuff. And it's just great to see like everybody. I mean, that was like the key week to getting OpenXR done at all in
Wow.
2019, 1.0. And I think at some point I said, hey, if we actually pull this off, I will personally go out and buy everybody ice cream to do this. And so we ended up getting it done. And I actually Ubered out to Target and bought ice cream and brought it back to the room. And
That's awesome.
everybody was shocked. Nobody thought I'd actually go do it, but I did. I went and bought ice cream. So it's
You're
like
like,
kind of a
I'm a
running
man of
thing
my
now.
word, okay?
Exactly. It's kind of a running thing now. If things go well, ice cream, there might be ice cream in it. So,
That's
but
awesome.
it was great to see because everybody was involved, everybody pitched in,
Yeah.
and just had this really great sense of accomplishment, like just how much we pulled off and how many issues we closed and how much just pure spec writing we got done. So
That's a
that was great.
milestone, man. That is so cool. Yeah, I mean, it seems like you guys work really well together, and I think that's like super important to see that everybody's working towards the same goal and just working to make VR and AR better for everybody. I think that's really good to know. Um, how did you get into VR?
Okay, well, I was in undergrad. I was studying computer science, and I think my freshman year I took a computer graphics course, and
Hmm.
then it was just downhill from there. Because it's like if I want to do computers, I want to do this. This
Right.
is really cool. And so I studied through undergrad, and then got interested into a grad school program at the University of North Carolina, which is like the #1 school in graphics and VR. So I went there, and
That's
I hadn't really
awesome.
had any experience with VR when I went there, and they had like the most amazing equipment you could possibly imagine with VR. This was several years ago,
At the
and just
time, you're
got
like,
sucked
this is
in.
amazing.
This is amazing, and the university. I mean, they have a lab, and all the equipment was available to all students. There was like nothing
Wow.
sequestered off from people. It's like, hey, do you
Have
have, if
fun.
it's free, use it and play with it and figure out how to make things happen. And so
That's so
got
cool.
involved in that and got my PhD in computer graphics. and doing research on interactions in VR, and then went away from it for a while because I had to go off and get a real job, and it hadn't taken off yet. And then when this wave of commercial VR came back, and the company got interested, it's
You're
like, hey,
like,
I
yes, this is my way back in.
I want to get back into this, and so back into it, and it's been quite fun seeing the fruits of everybody's work, and how far, like you said, just in the last few years, how far commercial VR has come, and where it's going to go. So
that's awesome. So did you so were you doing sort of a lot of things before you went to school, like with any development or graphics and things like that?
I was doing a little on the side, like small projects in graphics, and this was early days. This was like when OpenGL was first coming about, and really understanding the rendering pipeline,
right?
How you draw a triangle, how you light it, etc., and playing around with that, and then going on into the university, got to play around with some really cool technology. Did protein folding in VR and early virtual environments in VR. It's funny because you see, many years later, you start to see the things that were in the lab, like now commercially viable, right? And like super small, whereas we had this huge, bulky, massive, data center trying to render a few frames, and now you've got these, you can wear it all on your head now, right?
Yeah.
So, it's been pretty amazing.
That is so cool. Yeah, I think it's so cool to see, like, even just where you've come from, doing all of that kind of stuff to working with OpenXR and just making breakthrough changes within the VR industry. Man, that's excellent. If you were to change anything about the VR industry, the way that it's done, immersion, mechanics, coding, development, anything, how would you go about doing it?
Oof, that's a big question.
It's a tough question. Think, if you could pick one thing.
Just one. I think I would make I would say the shared development between desktop and VR easier, right? Where you could, it would be kind of an incremental change to do VR on top of a 2D game. Because I think it really, where we stand right now is like, we just need the content. We need games developed for VR. And there are a lot of interesting mechanisms and differences between desktop and VR developed games. But I think if we could minimize those and figure out, how can we make it viable for the major titles coming out on a console or on the PC, show up in VR, either in mobile or on, tethered to a PC. I think you would see, a lot more adoption, and just, I just want to see there's lots of cool, desktop games I want to see in VR, right? There's just like such amazing titles. It's like, just bring them to VR. I want to go run around in Witcher.
Oh my God, yes.
And just like want to jump on the horse and ride,
Oh yeah, so totally. I know. Yeah, I think about that all the time. Like, that would just be so cool to have that in a VR game. Like I love The Witcher 3 and like Cyberpunk and stuff like that. Like, those are really awesome. And another favorite series of games is like the Metro games, Metro and like Stalker and stuff like that. I'm like, that would be excellent to have Metro, like the immersion and stuff like that of like cleaning your gas mask or wiping off like the condensation and stuff like that. Having sort of things like that just makes it so much more immersive. But then, even Half-Life Alyx sort of took that one step further a little bit, like where you could actually put the gas mask on your face or like a hat, and then you're playing for like an hour or two and you're like, oh, I still have that on. Like you just see it barely, like in your peripheral vision and stuff like that. It's so cool. What would you say is your favorite game of all time? Just to round it out.
So
VR, non-VR, whatever.
Sure, Witcher 3 is way up there, like in terms of like recent games. That was just such a compelling experience from a visual perspective, storytelling, open world. It was really great. I think in the history, I would almost have to say the original Zelda or the NES.
Yes.
Because, and it's like, if from my perspective, it was like one of the first games that was really, I wouldn't say immersive, but it sucked you in, because I remember like it was the holidays. I played with my cousin and my brother. We spent almost 2 full days awake trying to play that game and complete it, right? And like taking turns, and just I think it was all the memories around just playing Zelda, and just like that. You're letting your imagination take you there, right? Where we have much more compelling visual experiences now, obviously.
Yeah.
But the early days of that was pretty amazing.
Yeah, the way they were able to do it back then, I think, is interesting. They had the writing that was able to pull you in. Now they have a lot of the cinematic experiences and the voice acting and all like that kind of culminate together to create that experience. Well, that's awesome. Well, if anybody in the chat has any questions, please put them in the Twitch chat so we can ask Brent. I don't think I have any more questions. Man, this was awesome. This is really cool. I'm excited that I was able to meet up with you and we were able to have this chat and help other people to understand what OpenXR is and, what you guys are doing to improve VR and AR as, for market, for commercial, for consumers, just all around. Awesome. And
appreciate the time and getting a chance to get the word out. And like I said, we're happy to hear from developers. Let us know. We have the OpenXR GitHubs you can check out for documentation, tests. Ping us there. I think there's some Chronos channels as well on forgetting where they are, but I think it's off of our website. You can check them out. Just give us feedback, things you want to see going forward in the API, things you'd love to change, etc. We want to make it for everybody and make sure that we're allowing as many games and as we talked about, AR and VR allow you to do completely new and interesting experiences. So anything we can do to assist.
We need more games. We need more games
and more interesting experiences.
Yes, definitely. So yeah, in case you guys are watching, if you guys are watching the video version of this video, or the video links are down below. You have mine for the Gamer Stash for Digital Denizens, and you have Brent's underneath him. So this is Brent Insko from OpenXR and the Chronos Group. You can find Brent Insko on LinkedIn. They also, OpenXR and Chronos Group have their Twitter account. And I think Chronos Group also has their own LinkedIn as well. So, again, they're on the screen. Also, you guys can find them there. And what do we have in the chat here? I don't have any questions, but I have been educated about things I didn't even know I didn't know. Thank you. I'm glad that you guys are here and paying attention. I really appreciate it. So, yes, thank you so much, Brent. Again, this was just a pleasure to have you on, and an honor. I do really appreciate it.
No, appreciate the time. It was great having a chat, and happy to come back sometime in the future.
Yes.
Hopefully we have, like I said, the thousands of titles.
Yes, I would totally look forward to that. Yes, thank you so much. All right, guys. Well, that is all the time that we have for today's Content Creation Corner interview. Thank you guys for showing up. Thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys on the next one. See you guys later.